was 21 years old, I started a jewellery brand on my dining table. I didn't really have any idea when I started making jewellery that it would go on to see me travel all over the world and be such a significant part of my career and life. For the 15 years that followed, I was the founder and creative director of that jewellery brand, which I ever so modestly called Samantha Wills. By all accounts, it was not just a commercially successful business, but also an incredibly successful brand. I wanted to create this masterclass so I could share with you everything I've learned about business and branding over those past 15 plus years, drilling into the milestones of how the brand went from my tiny dining room table all the way to an international stage. And to provide you with a little bit of background, I want to share a quick snapshot of the brand's highlight reel. Now, I grew up in a small town on the east coast of New South Wales, Australia called Port Macquarie. I'm from a very blue-collar upbringing. My dad was a travelling shoe salesman through regional and rural areas of New South Wales, and my upbringing was very much in a community of middle-class, hard-working people. I was always creative as a kid, and when I was 11 years old, one school holidays to keep me out of trouble, my mum put me into beading classes at the local craft store, and it truly was there that I learnt the basis of jewellery making. I would make jewellery and sell it in the playground at school. The following year, my mum opened a small clothing boutique and said I could have a tiny space on the counter next to the cash register to display my jewellery, which in retail terms is definitely prime real estate. So I took her up on that offer, and by the age of 12, I was selling about $50 worth of jewellery a week, which in 12-year-old currency versus adult currency is like $1 trillion billion. By the time I was in my final year of high school, it was 1999, and I know what I'm about to say makes me sound incredibly old, but in 1999, in my tiny little beach town, the internet wasn't really a thing yet. We had 2 computers at school, and they were for the computer coding class. So at the time, the internet wasn't at all this portal into being able to access what was available outside of my community. And to be honest, at the time, I didn't even know that being a jewellery designer was an actual career, let alone being a creative director. Well, I love being creative. I thought that's what you do for fun. A job is for work. And all I knew is what I saw, and what I saw was hardworking blue-collar people. Careers were for smart people, doctors and lawyers, and something that you needed to go to university to get a degree for, and I knew that just wasn't for me. So I just assumed I was destined to work at a job and express my creativity as a hobby in my spare time. I barely finished high school and did not go to university. Instead, I stayed in my hometown and worked jobs as a waitress at Hog's Breath Cafe. For many seasons, I dressed up as Cinderella at a local theme park called Fantasy Glades, which truly is like a poor man's Disneyland. I was also a promo girl for the local radio station, where I'd drive to different locations with giveaways, and then they'd do a live cross to me so I could tell listeners, where they could find me. And I remember the station wanted everyone on air to have like a quirky character, like personality name. And mine was Sammy on the Street, which I'm now very aware makes me sound like I was a lady of the night. I also worked in the local surf store and had a stint working in the galley of a local river cruiser boat. And then one day there was an ad in the local newspaper calling for job applications at a new retail chain that was opening up in town called Prouds the Jewellers. At this point, I hadn't made jewellery for a few years, and I look back now and see that the universe was definitely trying to nudge me back in that direction. But at the time, I just saw the ad and thought it would be fun working in a jewellery store. I applied and got the job there, and as a retail assistant, the jeweller on premise took me under his wing and showed me all there was to know about fine jewellery. The year that I was at Prouds was an unofficial education in what the universe had in store for me. I just didn't know it yet. By 2003, I knew I had to spread my wings a little and decided to leave my hometown and move to Sydney. My best friend Melanie and I were both 20, and we moved into a little flat together. Once in Sydney, I set about finding a job, and given my most consistent experience was in retail, I got a job as a sales assistant at a local retail chain called Surf, Dive and Ski. It was around this time I started making jewellery again, just as a hobby and on the weekends. And Mel would, have friends over, and they'd see all the jewellery that I'd made and be like, can I buy these? Or, can I take these ones home? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. Then they started bringing friends over who wanted to buy more jewellery. Then those friends were asking if I could take the jewellery over to their houses and, set it up on their dining room tables where they'd invite friends over to purchase the jewellery. So word got around, and it was kind of like a very organic starting of, in the 80s or 90s when your mum would have a Avon or Nutrimetics party, these kind of jewellery parties started to form. Here I am at 21 years old, rolling around Sydney in my beat up old 1984 Corolla hatchback with the boot full of Tupperware containers of jewellery that I'd handmade on my dining table. And this really did start to take off. I was hosting about 3 or 4 jewellery parties, every week. And the other nights I'd have my head down, sitting at my dining table till all hours of the night, making jewellery to refill the stock. And by day I'd work my normal job each week. So now, in addition to my full-time Monday to Friday job at SDS, the jewellery parties every other night and hand-making all the stock on my dining room table, now every single Sunday, rain, hail or shine, I would wake up and line up for my market table allocation every Sunday morning at 3 a.m. because still in 2003, this was before online registration. Table allocations for the markets would be given out to, first come, first serves, and then the gates would open at 8 a.m. After about a year of doing all this, in early 2004, I met a fellow stallholder at the markets whose name was Justin. Justin was a retail distributor for some Australian brands, and he would use the markets to clear past season stock. He explained to me that he had taken a multi-branded showroom wall at Australian Fashion Week that year, and this was a time when they had a wholesale section kind of in the middle of Fashion Week. It was like a trade show style showrooms that would set up and the main tents would run around them. And in between shows, retailers would come and view new collections and look at emerging designers. And Justin said that he had one spot left on his showroom wall, and that spot was about the size of a door. And he asked me if I might want to showcase my jewellery there. I asked him how much the space would cost, and he said it was $500 for this panel. And now look, at this point, I had no idea how to manage money and definitely no idea how to manage cash flow for a business. So while I was selling a lot of jewellery, all the components I was purchasing were at full retail from independent craft and bead stores. And, I was existing very much hand to mouth because I just didn't know how to run that element of a business. And so around this time, I think I had, $509 in my bank account, and Justin offered me the space. And it really seems like a really stupid financial decision at that moment. But I said I'd take the spot at Fashion Week, and I did so thinking it might be a good move to promote maybe my market stall. And I crossed my fingers hoping that I'd make 1 or 2 orders back to cover the cost. I think back to it now, and I had absolutely no idea what I was doing and really had no business at all being at Fashion Week. But buyers seemed to love my designs, and at the end of the 4-day trade show, I'd written over $17,000 worth of orders. So I got home that evening and I was going through my triplicate carbon copy order book that I'd written all the orders in, still mesmerised that I'd taken so many orders over the 4 days. And then realised in my naivety that I'd promised absolutely everyone a 2-week delivery. And it very quickly dawned on me that it was going to be near impossible to hand make all of those orders in that time frame. So I quit my real job at Surf Dive and Ski the next day and decided to throw absolutely everything I had at forging a career as a jewellery designer. In the early 2000s, no one was really doing statement jewellery. Mainstream high street retail chains didn't have dedicated accessories divisions, and there was very few bespoke jewellery brands. So I started to get a lot of media interest in what I was doing, both the category and design, but also the story behind it and the fact that someone so young had launched a business. By 2005, I had the brand in about 40 retailers across the country, and the relationship with fashion editors remained strong, so I would get called to create pieces for when they were shooting local celebrities. In 2006, I did my first standalone show for Australian Fashion Week, where I created 15 outfits out of jewellery. This got the attention of larger Australian retailers, and the brand was then picked up by Maya. By 2007, 3 years in, I had built a significant profile around the brand. It was now stocked in about 70 retailers, and from the outside, everything looked like it was going brilliantly, but I couldn't keep operating the business as a solopreneur. There was only so many hours in the day, and at this time I was working for about 20 of them. My hands were bleeding from making so much jewellery, and I could no longer keep up with the demand on running the business. At 25, I knew how to build a brand, but I did not know how to run a business, and I specifically had no concept of how to correctly run the cash flow. I knew I needed help, and I set about trying to find a business partner. It was around this time I met a gentleman by the name of Jeff Bainbridge. He was absolutely everything I wasn't. I was creative, brand-driven, very right brain, and he was numbers, logistics, business-driven, and very, very left brain. I convinced him to take equity in my company because I needed help on running the business side of things, and he agreed, and within 6 months he turned the business to cash flow positive. From the day we became business partners in 2007, we did not have a loss-making year since. We scaled the production and manufacture accordingly, and with his business mind and my creative one, we went on to create a very commercially successful brand and business, both domestically and internationally. In 2008, we started to get a lot of traction with celebrities wearing the brand. Pink purchased our entire collection, and it was the same year that actress Eva Mendes wore a ring of ours called the Bohemian Bardot. From the day that she wore it and for the 10 years that followed, it never left the top of our bestsellers list. Almost 1 million of them moved through our warehouse, and it organically became our brand's signature item. In 2009, we rolled out through iconic Australian department store David Jones. That same year, our international celebrity placement really started to take off. We had everyone from Taylor Swift, Katy Perry, Beyonce, Pink and JLo, just to name a few, wear our jewellery. And celebrity placements meant lots of interest from America, which saw me visiting the USA every few months. And in 2010, stylist Patricia Fields selected a pair of our earrings and they featured in the Sex and the City film, which really did put us on the map on an international stage. And to have our brand affiliated with Sex and the City was truly such an incredible opportunity for us. And it was that same year I made the move to New York to establish the brand in the US market. That move saw me split my time between New York City and Australia, doing 6 weeks in New York and 10 days Sydney consistently. Later that year, we also underwent a rebrand and introduced our new corporate logo and more refined branding. In 2011, the New York Times named us as a breakout star of the year, and we continued to further expand with international sales offices in Sydney, Los Angeles, New York, Tokyo, Paris, and Korea. By 2012, we had hit stride with growth and market share, and our direct-to-consumer business was rapidly growing, which saw us start to invest heavily in the back end of our digital space. We were named in the Cosmo Fearless Female Awards as Entrepreneur of the Year in 2013, and it was also the same year I was approached by Treasury Wine Estate to do a brand collaboration on our own sparkling wine, Peacock Lane by Samantha Wills. This exposure further grew the commercial profile of the brand, and the affiliation with Treasury would go on to be a 5-year partnership. We were awarded the Reader's Choice Best Australian Accessories brand by Marie Claire, and that same year we did a couture show with Fashion Palette for New York Fashion Week. In 2014, we identified that our customers were seeking bridal and bridesmaids jewellery, so we launched the Samantha Wills Bridal division. It soon became 48% of our total revenue, so it was an incredibly successful category for us and one that spoke so organically to our customer. And that same year, we also signed our first product licensing contract and launched Samantha Wills Eyewear. It was this year that we also released our jewellery chest. It was the highest priced item that we ever had in the business, and while the Bohemian Bardot held the top spot for quantity, it was this item that saw it as the highest revenue item. In 2015, Treasury Wine Estate named me as their creative director and spokesperson across the entire Yellow Glen portfolio. Yellow Glen is a very commercial brand, so my appointment to the front of the brand as creative director and spokesperson became a very public-facing role. We were named as the Cosmopolitan Fashion Designer of the Year. This year was very much a turning point for me personally. I really found myself able to forge an identity outside of just being a jewellery designer. In 2016, I launched the Samantha Wills Foundation, a platform designed to empower women in business. I launched it quietly just to test the waters to see how it was received, and in the first 3 weeks, we received the amount of traffic we thought we would receive in the first year. So we knew we had created something that the market was wanting. My work on the foundation was seen by people I didn't even realise were watching, and one day I received a very unexpected phone call from Australian telco company Optus asking me to front their new national small business campaign, which was to run as print, billboard and TVC across the country. The other person fronting the campaign was Mark Wahlberg, which still feels incredibly surreal to even say now. It was also the same year we were profiled in Forbes magazine. By 2017, I had done the Sydney to JFK flight over 100 times, and it was really starting to take its toll on me. I was inducted into the Women's Business Hall of Fame, and it was the same year that we signed our biggest ever retail deal, and that was with an American direct-to-consumer retail giant, QVC. In 2018, the Australian published our QVC partnership as we were the first Australian jewellery brand to affiliate with the US network, and a few weeks later, I was presenting our collections live on American cable television. QVC is a retail giant, and it was not uncommon to be selling $20,000 per minute just of a single SKU, which is just absolutely wild. The brand was in growth and we had refined the systems and processes to scale it globally, but by this point in my career I had designed over 12,000 pieces of jewellery. I was exhausted creatively, physically, emotionally, and in the June of 2018 I made the biggest decision of my life, and that was to close the Samantha Wills jewellery business. And we made that announcement publicly in August of that year. I had no interest in selling my name, so selling the business just wasn't an option to me. In the 6 months that followed, we celebrated everything about the brand, our people, our extended community, and everything the brand had achieved over the years. January 11th, 2019 was our last day of trade, and at 5 p.m. that day, 15 years after launching at Australian Fashion Week, we closed the doors permanently to Samantha Wills Jewellery. So that's the highlight reel. But as we all know, the realities of what it takes to build a brand and run a business are far beyond what I've listed here. This highlight reel timeline will be with us throughout the whole course because I'm going to revisit it many times to fill in not only how we achieved everything I just listed, but also to fill in the blanks of the hurdles, hardships and sacrifice that it took to get the brand and the business to be in the best position for those opportunities. And specifically what is required of a creative founder, someone like you and someone like me who embarks on this entrepreneurial path.